What on group leaders, Pastor McKinney here. Welcome to week 7 of our spring semester of growth groups, a place where friends help friends follow Jesus. We had an full packed, incredible weekend with Good Friday and Easter, which means we've hit the midway point of the semester. And right around this time period is when people really need encouragement to stay faithful, stay connected, and stay prayerful in their groups. And really with Zoom call, there's not a whole lot of excuses why someone wouldn't show up, but we're not going to guilt trip people like that. We're just going to continue to press upon them. Hey guys, let's stay faithful. Let's keep pressing through, meeting together. I just said this last week with my growth group on my Zoom call. Hey guys, let's continue to stay faithful because right around the midway point, people are getting tired. So just continue to encourage your groups to stay faithful in attending. If someone misses, don't guilt trip them. Just say, hey, we missed you. How can we pray for you? We love you. We miss seeing your face. Look forward to seeing you next week. So that's the big emphasis. And then number 2, the other focus is you're continuing to reach out to people in your group every single week. Hey, are there any needs that you guys have? Are there any other needs outside of the group that you guys know of that we could band together and help and address? And if you don't recall the protocol for how to care for people in your group, you can see the previous video as well where I talk about that. And then the other thing is, this week is I intentionally left the questions more brief and vague because number 1, it was a really long, big, full weekend, so there's no pressure to have a really big, huge, full, long growth group either. And I intentionally left it short because I think it's really good more towards the second half of the semester to not just. So the first half of the semester is all about growing in fellowship and connectedness. Just feeling like you guys are friends and you guys get along. And then towards the second half, you really want to try to push things on a more spiritual, intimate level. Go with a little bit more depth in your intimacy together as a group. And one of the ways you can do that is spending more time in prayer. So I intentionally left the group guide a little bit more vague and less questions to leave you some more time at the end to pray at the end of your groups together. And one little, well, I'll get to that in just a second about practical ways you can pray together. But before I dive into the questions, I want to just briefly discuss the 2 sermons. So this first sermon was Good Friday, which I led with John chapter 4, the woman at the well. And the phrase that I kept using was shame barriers, right? There are these shame barriers that this woman had that was preventing her from experiencing the fullness of Christ's love for her at the cross. And the first level of barriers were external, right? And then the second level were internal barriers. External barriers are barriers of shame that are things that we aren't necessarily culpable for, things we're not really necessarily always responsible for. So we're kind of born into them, whether it's a family of origin or ethnicity or cultural background or class or city where you're from or identity of people that you're a part of or groups of people that you're a part of. Sometimes those things we can experience vicarious shame through them. So we haven't necessarily done anything wrong, but simply by being a part of that group, we experience shame and ostracization from others. And we may feel distance from Jesus because of that, but Jesus breaks through those barriers. But most of all, the shame barrier that Jesus got to on the inner inside, at the inside of her heart, having to do specifically with men in her life, right? Go call your husband and bring him here, right? There's something about her relationship with men that was her thing. And I called it the thing that we're holding on to, concealing, hiding, protecting, that really prevents us from experiencing the full living water that Jesus Christ wants to unleash upon us from the cross that he so gladly bore for our sins. So that was kind of the big question. What's your thing? What do you need to trade for Jesus? What's the internal shame barrier that you're kind of holding on to that Jesus wants you to bring out? And he wants to just cover it with his grace from the cross. So that was the Good Friday sermon. And then Pastor Mike's Easter sermon was all about human hope versus divine hope, right? That was kind of how he started. Do you have human hope or do you have divine hope? And how the resurrection of Jesus Christ does not give us human hope. It gives us divine hope. Human hope is temporal. Human hope is fickle. It comes and it goes, and it creates anxiety in us because it has to be sustained even though it can't. And then there's divine hope, the everlasting hope that we have. The fact that Jesus' resurrection declares that the things that are broken in this world will ultimately be mended, made new, and will be made unfadable, you might say, through his resurrection, right? right? And his most important question that Jesus asked, that Pastor Mike emphasizes, do you believe this? And he says something in the sermon. Pastor Mike said, that's the most important question in the entire history of the human race. Do you believe this? Do you believe the gospel? Do you believe that Christ rose from the dead? Do you believe that his resurrection is the only possibility that someone can experience true everlasting hope despite the circumstances that we find ourselves in with COVID-19? So those were the two sermons. It's kind of a summary recap that I wanted to give you guys so you guys can have a little bit better kind of framework in helping people talk through this sermon. And on the sermon guide, I emphasize the things that you're focusing on, as well as I put some of the sermon summary notes into the sermon guide as well. As usual, there's the getting to know you questions. How's everyone feeling doing these days? It's really important that as we're isolated, always take time. Hey, just how's everyone doing? Hey guys, good to see you. Why don't we just go around? Everyone, here are my blocks. I see 3 blocks in front of you. You're gonna go first, then you're gonna go, then you're gonna go. Everyone take 30 seconds to a minute. Just how you doing? And give people just time to just kind of word vomit. That's a horrible way of describing sharing, but some people say it all the time. Anyways, just how's everyone feeling? How's everyone doing these days? Are there any updates since last week? It's really important that you ask that question to see how people are doing. And then icebreaker. It's not really serious. It's just not really funny. More just it was a really full weekend. It was a beautiful weekend, right? Sunday was incredible. Nice weather. Just how was everyone's Good Friday, Easter weekend? What did they do? How did they celebrate it in isolation? And have people share about that, and that should be a good time for you guys to catch up in that way. But as you can see, there's only 4 questions in the sermon guide. 4 questions. The first one is what stood out to you from this past weekend from both Good Friday and Easter. So have people think about what's one thing that stood out to them from Good Friday and one thing that stood out to them from the Easter sermon. And have people draw those things out, what they were said, and how they were personally impacted by both of those sermons. That should give you plenty of time to talk, especially if it's a smaller group. Give people, have people go around the whole group and share those questions there. Number 2, Pastor McKinney, that's me, emphasized this thing that the Samaritan woman had to hand over to Jesus. Did anyone have some thing that they handed over to Jesus? Is anyone willing to share what it was? I don't know about you guys, but I had some things that I had to hand over to Jesus. So give people some time to think about what was their thing, and frankly, encourage people to share that. And if someone's not comfortable sharing what their thing was, their internal shame barrier that they had to hand over to Jesus, something they're holding on to that's preventing Jesus' love from the cross flowing like living water into their soul. Is anyone willing to share what it was? Don't force people to share, but encourage them to share. If someone's like, I don't feel comfortable sharing, you might want to consider just following up with them afterwards on a one-to-one basis. Say, hey, you didn't share, just wanted to reach out and see, do you feel comfortable? Just kind of share with me, maybe we can pray about it. And you're not just bringing things to the light with Jesus, you're also bringing them to light with each other. And this is a great opportunity to go deeper in intimacy with your group there. In questions like that, question number 2 there, which the thing that you're handing over to Jesus, that could get pretty heavy. Someone might have something heavy to share. And remember to always be sensitive to the Spirit. If there's like a heavy moment, like this has happened to me on multiple occasions, someone will just share something and it's weighty. And it's like, you know what, guys? We're just going to pray over so-and-so right now. Can we just pray over you right now? And you're just going to pray. Just pray over them. Just bathe them in the prayers of Jesus Christ for them. So that's something to be very, very mindful of in that question there. Number 3, Pastor Mike, not me, the other Mike, emphasized the difference between human hope and divine hope, and how Jesus' resurrection alone provides this. What things have you personally seen as incapable of providing the hope that you need? This gives people an opportunity to spot things in their life that they didn't realize they were putting hope in, that COVID-19 has exposed to be incapable of providing them with divine hope that only Jesus can provide them. Leaning on the everlasting arms of Jesus. So give people time to think about that. And last but not least, in question number 3, in what ways are you practically going to lean upon Jesus for your hope and not upon that thing? Last but not least, question number 4, what do you specifically need prayer for this week? I don't usually include this question, but the reason why I included the question, what do you specifically need prayer for, is because it actually builds into the discussion things that you need to pray for each other about. So make sure that you leave plenty of time for prayer at the end. I would even suggest like 15, 20 minutes, probably at least, for this question here at the end. And after everyone shares what they need prayer for, then just pray. And one thing you could practically do, if you have a large group or there's like some kids in the background, you might tell people put their mic on mute as someone is praying, and after they're done praying, if they want to pray, unmute themselves, then they can start praying. Because if you're trying to pray and there's all this background noise, especially me, like you can probably hear that that was probably my middle child like skipping across the wood floors above me right now. That's very distracting whenever you're trying to pray. So I would have to mute myself in Zoom call so that we could hear each other during the prayer time. There they go again, running up and down. All right, so last thing, prayer. One thing you can specifically pray for, so not just praying for the needs of your group, but also one thing big, please, you can pray for. I'm asking you personally, as an elder and a pastor of the church, pray specifically for wisdom and guidance from the Spirit at the leadership level as we navigate the future. Honestly, guys, we don't know how long this is going to last. Some people think it's going to be next month. Some people think it's going to be the end of the summer. That we just don't know. We don't know that. There's some projections and whatnot. But even if the stay-at-home order is lifted, like, what's that going to look like? Is it going to be like, hey, we're just going to gather? Hey, let's gather the church. We don't know that, and so we need the Spirit's help. Please pray with us for God's guidance and how we can navigate at the leadership level for the sake of the church. I love you guys. That's all I have for this week. I pray that the Lord blesses you and your group. Please reach out to me if you have any needs or questions at all. Love you guys.